All right, we're recording just a quick landscape retouching demo. So what I want to do is I'm going to go grab a photo. So I'm just going to edit on this photo. And so I'm just going to open it up into Photoshop. And so I just wanted to share some more advanced techniques in Photoshop if you are interested in using it or applying it to your photos, and how we can basically add colors to specific areas or specific highlights, midtones, and shadows. We can really control where we add colors and really bring out colors in a photo, especially in a landscape photo. So what I was going to show was underneath your layers, there's an option to add a solid color. So what we can do with the solid color is we can pick a color. So for this one, I'm going to add like a warm color to my highlights, and I'll show you how that will blend. So I'm just going to go kind of add like a kind of orange. Hit OK. So obviously it's a solid color. So what we need to do is to change our layers blending mode. So I'm just above my layers, I'm going to click on normal. I'm going to scroll down to either overlay, soft light, or hard light. You can kind of see how it does different things. So I'm going to use overlay for this one. The benefit of using a solid color on a separate layer is I can adjust the opacity of it if it's too strong, and I can also trash it if I mess up, right? So anytime I can, but I'm working non-destructively, I'm working on a separate layer, so that's the point. So I'm just going to do a solid color, and now let's choose that orange again. So again, I'm just going to change my blending mode to overlay. And again, you can experiment. You can see what these different modes do. The benefit of Photoshop is you can see how each does a different blending mode, and it reacts differently to your photo. So let's say this looks good, but I want it just to show up on my like highlights. So what I can do, if I double click to the side of the layer, so I'm just double clicking right where my layer is on the side, there are these layer style options. So it gives me even more options, right? I could add some of these features, or there's this option called blend if. And so for the underlying layer, I'm just going to bring up the shadows, and you can see how it's kind of taking it off. So it's not showing it on my shadow area. It looks pretty choppy here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt or Option, and I'm going to break this apart so it blends it a little bit more. So I basically have a little gap here. So I can kind of play with, how far, I can kind of control the blending between my midtones and shadows to my highlight. And then once I get it to a place I like, just hit OK. So you can see this is the before and after. So I'm just applying it to kind of my midtones and highlights. So the cool thing about the solid color is I can double click on the color and I can change it. So I can go through and start seeing what other colors look like, right? So that's the benefit of this option, is you can really choose the colors. You can try darker colors, lighter colors, more saturated colors, right? You can experiment with it a bit more. So that looks pretty good. So let's say I wanted to add like a fake sun. So maybe the sun was in the shot, but I want that kind of warm glow. What I can do is add a gradient that looks like a sun. So how we do that is underneath, we're going to choose our gradient in our adjustment layers. So where it says gradient here, I'm just going to click on the color. And what we want to do on the left color, so this is a color to transparent. I'm just going to click on the left and then click on the color. So I'm just going to make that to like a kind of warm yellow. Hit OK. And then I want it to fade. So right now it's fading to black, like a clear black. So I'm just going to click on that one and select kind of like a warmer orange, like the sun would actually kind of fade off to. So once I have the gradient right, so again, you can change the colors. If it looks weird, you can change those colors. That's pretty good. And then just hit OK. So where it says style, I'm just going to change it to radial. So now we got a nice kind of glowy yellow shape, right? And so what we can do, you can adjust the scale of it. So you can make it bigger or smaller, depending on, how big you want the kind of sun glow to be. Hit OK. So what we need to do is to change our blending mode. So I'm just going to go down. Screen is a lightning mode. So this is before and after. It has kind of a brighter look. You could also do like an overlay, soft light or hard light, depending on, what you think looks good for your photo. So I'm just going to do screen as like a lighter option. So if I double click on that gradient fill, I can use the move tool and I can move it into place. Again, I can adjust the scale, right? So it looks pretty good. I have this kind of warm glow here as like a fake sun. Another option is I could add a fake lens flare, right? If I had a sun, it would be creating like a fake, like a lens flare on my lens if I was shooting straight at it. And so what you can do is add a fake lens flare in Photoshop. So what you need to do is if you hold down the Alt or Option key, I'm gonna press Alt Option and then click on where it says create a new layer, that little plus, and it gives me a new layer option. So I'm just gonna change the mode to overlay. And we need to just check fill with overlay, neutral color, 50% gray. Make sure that's checked. So change the mode to overlay, check that box, and hit OK. So it's basically adding a gray layer on the top. And if you go to filter, down to render, we can go over to lens flare. So in the lens flare box, you have a little plus where you can drag where it's going to go in your photo. So I'm going to kind of put it in the center. And then you can change your lens type. So there's 50 to 300, 35 millimeter, 105, and movie prime. They'll have different kind of flares. I'm just going to do a 35. And you can adjust the brightness of it depending on how bright you want. And then hit OK. And so now I got a fake lens flare. So if I turn this off and on and kind of zoom in, you can see, right, I added like a fake lens flare like it would be in actual photo. The good thing is, because it's on a separate layer, I can bring the opacity down if it's too strong to like a lower percentage. So depending on how much of that lens flare I want to show. If you messed up with the placement, just go make sure your history window is open. So history window is open. And I'm just going to go back before the lens flare and then just go filter, render, lens flare. And then I can just move the placement of it, right? So if I kind of mess up the placement and then just hit OK. So now I got a kind of a cool lens flare. If I wanted to add like really like purple in the shadows, I'm just going to do another solid color. So I'm just going to click here, solid color. Let's do kind of magenta. And then change our blending mode to overlay. So that looks pretty cool. So then, again, I can double click on the right of the layer and change the blending mode. So now I'm going to take it off the highlights. So it's just going to affect kind of my mids and shadows. I'm going to press Alt or Option to split it apart so it has a smoother transition. And then hit OK. And then again, I can play with different blending modes. Soft light looks pretty good. I can bring the opacity down if it's too strong. But it looks pretty good. So just wanted to kind of show that. So I could save this with my layers. So if I wanted to keep my layers, I would go Save As and make sure it was a Photoshop document. So make sure it's Photoshop format and then save it with your layers. I would call it like a V2 for my edit. If I was finished and I was happy with it, then I would just go to Layer, Flatten Image. It's going to combine those layers together, and then it'll let me save it out as a JPEG. So I'm just going to go File, Save As. I'm just going to call this thing a V2 for version 2. Make sure it's a JPEG, and then hit Save and OK. So then if I go back to Bridge, here's my before and after. Just going to let it load. So before So really affecting my colors, adding a fake sun, adding a fake flare. So you can see a lot more kind of atmosphere effects going on. There's more we can do that's a bit more advanced, but I just wanted to show a little bit today of just what you can do with your colors. And again, you can do that to any type of photo. You know, all those things apply. You could add a flare to a portrait was behind their head, or a fake sun behind someone's head, or change those colors in your highlights or shadows using those solid color fill blending modes. So I'm just going to turn off the recording.